Good morning, gentlemen and gentlewomen. Today is Monday. It is the start of the new week on this August the 22nd. And what we are doing today is me reporting from exploring a series of wretched hives of scum and villainy in the form of Reddit, MMO Champion, and the official general discussion forums of WoW to sort of gauge what were the community's thoughts about a general question related to the upcoming expansion Dragonflight. The general question is, what is it that you would like to see in Dragonflight? If there was one thing you could change for Dragonflight, what would it be? What would you like to see improved in Dragonflight? And try to look for what were the community's more pressing matters in this regard. You know, what was the community thinking about? Were they thinking about the raid? Were they thinking about the dungeon? Were they thinking about the open world? Maybe the professions, etc., etc. And try to see what was the general idea from our dear community. So let's start with the first request that I have seen being put forward the most, regardless of the community space I was in. That request was account-wide. What? Account-wide what? Account-wide anything, really. Account-wide reputations, account-wide currencies, account-wide progression of quests, like the raid quests of today, for example, or basically everything you can think of. Just make it account-wide, even account-wide gold. Why do we still have to have gold? Why do we still have to trade gold between characters every time? Can't we just have a single shared pool of gold? That seems to be one of the more requested additions for Dragonflight. Now, obviously, we already know this addition is not going to happen in Dragonflight. At the very least, for the moment, there is no account-wideness in Dragonflight. We do have the change to reputations, where reputations in Dragonflight will no longer go from their normal, honored, revered, exalted type of branches, but instead they will have a renown system. So they will work like renown levels right now. Every renown level is 1000 rep, and then every time you reach 1000 rep you go up one renown level, so you gain rewards much more smoothly, rather than keeping the few reputation rewards you get locked behind actually reaching exalted, for example. But it is still obviously not quite having account-wide reputations. Even if you have alt catch-up mechanisms already in place for Dragonflight, it's definitely not like having account-wide rep, not to mention most of the other stuff in the game won't be account-wide. So that is one of the main requests, one of the main wishes from the community for Dragonflight, to have a much less hindrance when it comes to logging out of your main and start playing your alts and finding out less things to grind that you have already grinded for on your main, so it feels just like a waste whenever you have to do it on one of your alt characters. Another request from the community, and this one will be pretty much our only stop in the PvP camp. There haven't really been from the general community too many requests when it comes to PvP. But if there has been one request, is the solo queue. Now, Blizzard has made steps towards solo queue in arenas by having solo shuffle. Now, solo shuffle is still not rated, and it still doesn't give as many rewards as the actual arena, the actual rated arena. So one of the requests is the solo queue RBG. So not just the solo shuffle for arena, but also being able to solo queue in rated battlegrounds. And then of course the more serious rewards when it comes to the solo shuffle, which right now it doesn't really have compared to rated arena. Perhaps this request makes more sense considering that rated solo shuffle, so rated solo arena, will be in Dragonflight, but for the moment we have no news, no entries about having rated solo queue battlegrounds for the moment. So it would also be kind of weird to allow solo rated arenas but not solo rated battlegrounds, so I think this is a pretty sensible request from the community. Another request I started to see more and more often, even throughout Shadowlands. It was already beginning to be quite a visible complaint from the community. So this is a wanted wish for Dragonflight, is to reduce the amount of bloat they like to throw at us. Now, this is where we split a little bit, because many players are requesting to reduce the amount of bloat they throw in our bags, we have seen in Season 3 of Shadowlands when we went around Zereth Mortis, how much crap ended up landing in our bags. But at the same time, we also have quite a few players complaining about the amount of bloat we have in our currencies. And funnily enough, one of the solutions of the players sick of the stuff in their bags is to just leave some of those materials and some of those pieces of currencies in the currency tab, which would then inevitably make the currency tab even more bloated. You know, at the moment, this is our Shadowlands currency tab. Just look at how many things you had to deal with throughout the expansion. Some of this, of course, is also seasonal, so it feels even worse. You have your cipher of the first ones for Season 3, together with all of the materials and stuff that landed in your bags from Zereth Mortis, but then you also had the Reservoir Anima throughout the expansion for your Covenant Hall. You had Stygia, and then you had Stygian Embers, and then you had Soul Ash and Soul Cinders, not to mention Valor, and even Tower Knowledge from Torghast. You had the Infused Ruby, if you were a Ventier, the Grateful Offering for your Covenant Hall as well. Plenty of stuff in your currency tab. So I think both camps of the communities requesting for less bloat are correct. Both the ones not wanting too much stuff in their bags, but also the ones that want a little bit more of a useful set of currencies throughout an expansion. Not just one currency that comes out in 10.1, stays alive for 5 months, and then we go into 10.2 and that currency is dead. I think it would be cooler if you had an expansion with a currency that lasted throughout the expansion and not just for every patch. I still agree though, there should be way less bloat when it comes to currency in the game. Another request, which we know is going to be in the game in Dragonflight, but we don't know in which capacity and in which timeline it will be, is the complete, final, shared cross-faction play. At the moment, ever since this expansion, Blizzard has started experimenting with cross-faction. We have gotten cross-faction dungeons, cross-faction arenas and battlegrounds. Basically, the rated stuff has gone into cross-faction, with the notable exception of the raids. Yes, you can still cross-faction with other players, but you can't cross-faction in a guild. This ruins, basically, the reason most players are in a guild, which is to raid. If you were to have too many players not from your guild because they are from a different faction and they can't join your guild, you would not be eligible for rewards. Either community-made rewards like rankings, like sites like WoW Progress or Raider.io checking your progression, etc., or even in-game rewards like Hall of Fame. You wouldn't even be available in Hall of Fame if you had 12 raiders from the Horde and 8 raiders from the Alliance and you got a world 70th kill of the last boss because your guild isn't recognized as a guild because it has too many players from a different faction in it. So another big request has been to introduce cross-faction play for guilds. Blizzard has already answered on this. They pointed out that cross-faction, when it comes to solo play, when it comes to allowing just random players to group up in a Mythic Plus key, is much more simple to obtain than changing the code to make cross-faction guilds possible. So it's much more likely that cross-faction guilds will come into play in Dragonflight, but not at the release of the expansion, which is sad and kind of disappointing. I wished to get cross-faction play for guilds by the release of the expansion, but it doesn't look like it's happening. So we can shelf this for a bit and wait a few patch cycles to see when is this going to be implemented for Dragonflight. Quick request for vanity points is the request of transmogs by the community. They want less weapon restrictions and weapon limitations when it comes to achieving transmogs, their favorite transmogs. You know, questions like why can we still have this lock-on when you're using fist weapons that you cannot turn them into a dagger, for example? Why is that? We just recently got wands being able to be transmogged into other items, and yet we still have this limitation for fist weapons. But this could also be extended. Can we get two-hand weapons to be transmogged into a one-hand weapon? Can we do the other way around? What about staves and want to transform them into a one-hander and an off-hand weapon, for example? All these type of limitations for transmog seem weird and not really needed. The only time you might even want to know which character is using what weapon is for maybe PvP. If you are expecting certain classes and specs to use certain weapons, maybe, but even that is a very far stretch in why you would want to limit Transmog so much. One little snarky request from the community, which I have seen in all the trio, in all the trifecta of communities for WoW, has been actually the request to get better writers for the story, because we have gotten some awkward bumps in the storytelling of WoW recently. I think Legion was serviceable. We have gotten some memes out of the I am my scars line from Illidan, but most of the other stuff was serviceable. Then BFA, we got the whole Sylvanas things, we got the whole statement about wanting to make a more morally grey story, and the community really ran with that sentence for the entirety of BFA. And then let's not even talk about what happened in Shadowlands, because it's better for everyone. So yeah, I think this is a fair request to have better writers in Dragonflight. I would not mind a change of pace in the writing style of the story in Dragonflight. Another thing that has been requested, perhaps this is a little bit more contentious, perhaps some players might feel a little bit more heated on this subject, is the request for more soloable endgame content. Now, if you ever visited these communities, generally there is quite a lot of pushback from this request. Many players see this almost as an offense, almost as a threat from players to request more solo endgame content, because they see it as something useless. You know, this is an MMORPG, it's supposed to be played with groups, with other players in a social environment. Why would you want the developers to spend time to focus on solo, on single player content? You might as well go and play an RPG. Those are usually the answers, the rebuttals that you see whenever someone points out the request, the wish for solo content in endgame. Now, we have, generally speaking, the open world zone of the new patch that counts for solo content, whether it's Cortia or it's Direct Mortis, that type of content. Blizzard has put a few bits and pieces of solo content here and there. We got the Withered training scenario in Legion. We had Island expeditions, which could still be made as a solo player, because you could still fill the group with NPCs, with AI bots, basically, so you could still solo them. And then you had this expansion, you had Torghast as a solo event. You also had other things like the Ventir and the Kyrian had some solo events, like the Path of Ascension for Kyrian, for example. So you had a few of these solo pieces of content, but players tend to request more of them usually. You know, requests like solo difficulty for dungeons and raids, perhaps more of these puzzles, more of these open world puzzles for some special mounts, for example, that takes a lot of traveling, a lot of discovering mysteries and whatnot, are always pretty liked features for solo content. So as I said, I won't go too much into the debate about more solo content. It usually triggers a lot of people, but I do think it's an okay request, as long as it doesn't take too much development time away from the devs for more group-wide content. I don't think it would be too hurtful for the majority of the player base to have more solo content in the game. Then we jump for the end when it comes to requested additions from the player base, away from solo content, and we go into the complete opposite, which is the group content, competitive side of things, which is the request to have more balancing, more class balancing, more class tuning, more and quicker. Not just more, but also quicker responsiveness from Blizzard when it comes to balancing the specs when a patch is out. Players have gotten quite tired over time. Every expansion, it feels like, gets the same kind of problem where the community seems to have identified some quite overperforming specs that start dominating the meta for quite a while. The requests to Blizzard to nerf the specs start coming in, and then Blizzard responds somewhere in the 3 to 4 months later, if even that. You know, this expansion we have gotten in Season 3, right as soon as these specs got their tier set pieces, we have seen Destruction and Survival become way overperforming compared to the rest, together with Blood Death Knight. This was in April. This turned into something in April. So these specs went completely unnerved throughout April, May, June, and July. And then in July, Season 4 came out, and still, many of these specs have not really been touched enough. Yes, we have gotten 2 nerfs to Survival and Destro, they are still at the top of the Mythic Plus hierarchy, not to mention Bloat Death Knight hasn't even been nerfed at all. So this is not the type of balancing that players seem to want. This slow balancing that leaves things hanging for this long of a period. They would like to see faster balancing, faster tuning, and not leaving. Even the reverse is true. It's not just about the OP specs getting nerfed, it's also about the very weak specs completely out of the meta getting buffed much earlier, much sooner. We can't just every time have a handful of specs, 5-6 specs, getting an experimental year, an experimental expansion from Blizzard, and then the experiment fails and Blizzard doesn't fix the spec because of reasons like, oh well, to fix the spec we would require an entire overhaul, an entire redesign, and we don't really have time in between seasons. We have to wait for the next expansion. So Blizzard cocks up Feral, cocks up Shadow Priest, cocks up Arcane Mage, and they leave them in that state for an entire expansion without any meaningful changes. That's also something that the player base would like to see changed when it comes to the class balance and tuning in Dragonflight. For this there might still be hope. This is a pretty far stretch to expect any change in behavior from Blizzard, given how they have been operating for the previous expansions. But hey, abuse and addiction of hopium and copium inhalers is not really that dangerous to your health, so it's not that bad for your health, hoping that this will happen in Dragonflight. So, with this last request from the community, these were all the most requested points for Dragonflight coming from the community. At this point, we might see some more requests in the future if something becomes more pressing, more important for the community to be fixing or adding to the game. But for now, these were the things that were asked the most of out of the community. Looking at their hangouts from Reddit to the official general forums to MMO Champion, these have been the main requested points from the community. We will see by the time Dragonflight launches how many of these things are getting introduced to the game, fixed, added, removed, and then draw some conclusions about how much of these became true in Dragonflight. But for now, all we can do is wait and see what happens. So, as usual, guys, thanks to all of my patrons for supporting me. This is a good help in allowing me to continue to produce content as we get closer to the release of Dragonflight. The beta should be out quite soon. Of course, don't worry, I'm still the chairman of the No Alpha organization. I hope that by the time the beta is out, I will be able to get in. I will be able to start streaming as well. Also, the camera is coming back up in a few days as well. Now it's much more manageable, it's much more chill to make videos on camera. So the Chad himself is about to come back. You can also support me by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to this channel. That's kind of the deal when watching YouTube videos. And finally, for the last of the social interactions, you can follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon, right down at these 2 links. With all of this said and done, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your pitiful worst day of the week, i.e. your Monday. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, oh no, I hate it when I fall asleep for like 2 to 3 hours. So now my entire sleep schedule is fucked because I am too awake to go to sleep. So I have to delay my sleep, which is going to turn out into a disaster. Fuck.